Today on Classroom Dynamics.
Maybe a student has had a bad experience in math class before and they have a fixed mindset about math and think, well, I'm just not a math person. I mean, how many of us have heard that? But then they've had...
Right here. that was me growing up.
Yes, I know, me too.
Especially when I hit junior high school and high school, that was me growing up for sure.
Not for me. I get it. We all have those things.
Welcome to the place where ideas collide. Adam Todd's here to be your guide. For teachers and techies, chasing the spark. Classroom dynamics, where we leave our mark. Let's dive in deep, the future's bright. Innovation shines like morning light. Teachers and tech, hand in hand we go. Welcome to the Classroom Dynamics Show.
Classroom Dynamics is sponsored in part by Logitech Education, empowering student voice and creativity with innovative tools like the Logitech Reach Adjustable Content Camera and the Zone Learn headset designed specifically for student comfort and focus. Discover how Logitech is transforming classrooms at logitech.com/education. Welcome to Classroom Dynamics, the podcast where we unlock the future of education. Hi, everybody. I'm your host, Adam Todd, and on today's show, we're thrilled to welcome Annie Brock and Heather Hundley, the authors of The Growth Mindset Coach 2nd Edition, a book that has become a go-to guide for educators looking to build resilient, curious, and motivated learners. This updated edition breaks down growth mindset practices month by month, giving teachers practical strategies, ready-to-use lessons, as well as meaningful ways to help students embrace challenges, learn from mistakes, and take ownership of their growth. So if you've ever wanted a roadmap for weaving growth mindset into everyday classroom culture, this conversation is going to give you exactly that. And it's all coming up next on Classroom Dynamics, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Classroom Dynamics is brought to you in part by Higher Ground Gear and the Vaulted Cell Phone Pouch, the smarter, faster way to create phone-free classrooms. Built with military-grade construction, RF shielding, and a high-decibel Velcro closure that stops distractions before they start, Vaulted keeps learning focused and secure. No locks, no end-of-the-day bottlenecks, just durable, easy-to-clean protection that gives students what they need most: attention, connection, and calm. Upgrade your school's approach to distraction-free learning with Vaulted at Higher Ground Gear. For more information, visit hggear.com today or contact us at info@hggear.com.
Behind every successful student is a teacher who feels supported. At Catapult Learning, we partner with educators through coaching, collaborative professional development, and classroom-proven tools. Our programs aren't just theory. They're actionable, relevant, and built to make your daily work easier and more effective. With 45 years of evidence-based success, Catapult provides the guidance and resources that help educators grow so students thrive. Catapult Learning, empowering teachers, inspiring futures. Learn more at catapultlearning.com.
On today's show, we're joined by Annie Brock and Heather Hundley, authors of The Growth Mindset Coach 2nd Edition. We'll be exploring practical strategies for weaving growth mindset into daily routines, how to support students who struggle with fixed mindset thinking, and ways teachers can model growth themselves, and best of all, how you can start implementing these ideas today. So I'd like to welcome authors Annie Brock and Heather Hundley to Classroom Dynamics. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. This is going to be such a fantastic conversation. I can feel it already.
Great. Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
Before we even begin, let's just talk about exactly what the phrase growth mindset means and how that could be applied into any classroom, no matter what grade level or curriculum area that's being taught. So I really think a lot of teachers may not really understand what that phrase does actually mean.
Yeah. In 2006, psychologist Carol Dweck published the book Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. It's based on more than 30 years of research and how people learn and achieve. And so really her work centers on giving us language around growth and fixed mindset. So to start us off, a fixed mindset really assumes that intelligence and abilities are fixed traits, leading us to believe or maybe avoid challenges and failures or having a fear of failure, while a growth mindset really does view our abilities as developed, through effort and practice, perseverance, and then just really offers us an opportunity to engage in challenges or mistakes, learning from them. And so fix being, again, just that you can't develop, you can't grow, you're just born with this set of traits that you kind of have what you have. And where growth, you can really develop those, that continuous improvement along the way. So both mindsets exist within us, but we, depending on the situation and maybe experiences that you have, think about the things that maybe have shaped your learning and what kind of mindset you had as you approach that learning.
And that can go both ways, right? For kids and teachers, right? You could have a fixed mindset for a teacher, but also a growth mindset for a teacher. You can have fixed mindset for a student and growth mindset for a student, correct?
And it could change from subject to subject and student to student, because it truly is a spectrum, like Heather said. So if you can imagine, you have a fixed mindset about some things. And my example is always exercise. Like, this isn't meant for me. My lungs hurt, my muscles get sore. So obviously I wasn't meant to be doing this. And so I might have a fixed mindset about, one thing, or maybe you have some preconceived notions about a student or had a bad experience with the student in the past. So you kind of posture yourself to be on the defensive, maybe having that fixed mindset about this specific student. Maybe a student has had a bad experience in math class before and they have a fixed mindset about math and think, well, I'm just not a math person. I mean, how many of us have heard that? But then they've had...
Right here. that was me growing up.
Yes, I know, me too.
Especially when I hit junior high school and high school, that was me growing up for sure.
Not for me. I get it. We all have those things. And so even from moment to moment, you can shift to be, think, oh yeah, I'm really great at English, and have this growth mindset about your English class and writing. And then, next block, you go to math class and think, well, there's no point in this. I'm not this type of person. So it's really, it's on that spectrum, and it's sliding all day long, and it can depend on a lot of factors. And so what our goal is just to talk about, how can you foster a growth mindset? How can you put yourself in that growth mindset, or create an environment where kids can readily get into that mindset to help them make their learning as successful as possible.
And I would imagine that starts, or at least starting the earlier the better with that elementary school, as opposed to waiting until a junior high school or high school student where, that, like you said, going from reading or writing where you're actually pretty good, and you go into math and you're like, all right, that's not really my thing. I'm going to fail and start down that road. So I guess fixing those issues earlier on is probably the best thing for it.
I think so, but I also think, this is kind of a meta response, but the whole idea of growth mindset is that we can always grow and develop. And it's kind of built on this idea of neuroplasticity, that your brain is always growing and making new connections. So far be it for me to say you need to learn it young, because I think anybody could come in and say, oh, I can. At any age, I can, with effort and perseverance, get better at anything, no matter when I start. But yeah, I'm sure building those ideas as early as possible definitely can help.
Well, it goes hand in hand with a lot of social emotional learning, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So I think it's a great point that you just made. So let's do this right off the bat. Let's go for a teacher, right? Teacher perspective here. Right off the bat, you discuss in the book that fixed mindset versus growth mindset, definition. You actually explain exactly what it means straight out. So how does this now play a role directly in our classrooms, no matter what age group is sitting in front of a teacher?
Yeah. So I think really thinking about, it's not, we talk about in the book, it's not just a matter of putting up posters that say I have a growth mindset, or to, determining that just because I say these words that we're all going to just embrace this growth mindset practice. It's really thinking about how we set our environment up, how we model that as teachers in the classroom. And so, I, as a previous kindergarten teacher, really working with students when they were practicing or trying something new. Obviously at age 5, there's a lot of new things that you're learning. And Carol Dweck speaks to this, young children are more apt to have a growth mindset. They're, more willing and more intuitive to be able to build upon that. And so, leaning into, we're taking on these challenges and we're all learning. I think we start to see that shift where we maybe are embarrassed by failing. We don't want other people to know. We don't want to be seen as something that's challenging. And so we start covering up some of those pieces. And so I think for an adult in a classroom, one of the things that is really helpful is modeling that, those think alouds. What does it take to achieve? Whether it's for yourself and you're setting it up for your students, like what are some things that you've potentially have overcome? What were the challenges that you maybe set some goals around, tried really hard, persevered, showed some resilience, maybe didn't make it to the very end of what you were hoping to accomplish, but along the way, what were the things that you did accomplish? And as, Carol Dweck mentions the famous word of yet. So you don't have it yet doesn't mean you're not going to get it, but I think working towards that is essential. And so Annie, I know, has some great stories as well, but really just providing an opportunity for that constructive feedback, that thinking about what we're praising students for, the process rather than, their people skills or their people elements, and really working to model that as a teacher in the classroom, I think is really important.
I wish I would have had you as my kindergarten or first grade teacher, and I'll tell you why. So I usually don't talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. When I was in kindergarten and first grade, and you just sparked this memory, holy cow, did I just go back 45 years ago? I was really deathly afraid to fail. At a very early age, kindergarten, first grade, I was almost so afraid to fail that I didn't even want to go to school because I knew I could try. But I knew if I failed, that was for some reason in my head, it was at a very young age. It was like, whoa, we can't even attempt that. So definitely a very fixed mentality there. So, I think you brought up a couple of great points there. And the fact that, yes, we have to also nurture students as well. And you don't know where they're coming from, but to at least let them know that as long as you're trying and going and moving at some pace, it's better than not moving at all. So that was a great point you brought up.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Carol Dweck takes it back to toddlerhood. When we're learning
I
to
went
walk,
back, all right.
we're falling down, we're getting up, we're, babbling, we're not getting the words right. People have to struggle to, and at some point, this switch flips and we become really self-conscious of falling down and having to get back up and making those mistakes. And she even talks about the language that parents use with kids, when we tell our kids, oh, you're so smart, when they do things, and in tying achievement to their personhood, Heather was saying, who they are as a person. Oh, I'm a smart person. It really is a disservice to them because they are going to run into something where, they can't get right away, or they're going to fail, or they're going to make mistakes. And if they create, this is why I think fixed mindset is really prevalent in gifted kids. So maybe that was your problem, Adam. You're too gifted. They really tie who they are as a person to their smartness or their ability to be a good student. And, Carol Dweck in her research emphasizes the importance of tying achievement to effort instead of to some type of preternatural ability that kids have. So instead of oh, you're so smart, say, oh, I can tell you worked so hard on that. And then as those connections build at a very young age, kids know that their results that they're getting is more about their hard work than just some, God-given talent that they have or something like that. So
this is like therapy for me, but keep going. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just think it's hard work too in the right areas of not just working hard on some abstract, but really focused and intentional and purposeful. We talked about structuring it out. There's chunking, there's goal setting, there's strategy that's involved. And so I think really helping through asking a lot of different questions, being able to get to what's the next right move, and then continuing to encourage that. And that has to come out not only out of the words that we say, but through our actions. And so if the words we say is that we embrace mistakes in our classroom and we're a community of learners and we all have different ways, different things that we're working on, and how can we support one another, but then my behavior management or my classroom management really doesn't allow for that practice to happen, or we take a different approach to it, that is more maybe within that fixed realm, then that definitely is counter to the work that we're trying to do in creating that environment of a growth mindset practice.
I just wrote a little piece about the book the other day, and the lead-in I use. I was watching TikTok videos, and this one came across my feed of a student, and he was his teacher and him in this like viral video were just screaming at each other. And he had perceived, it was a high school class, and he had perceived she had given some misinformation and used a term that he felt was racist. And he was yelling at her and she was yelling at him. It was very unproductive. All the kids were yelling, other kids were filming. And in the back, there's this gigantic bulletin board, growth mindset. Like, none of this is happening in this conversation. So it does feel like sometimes it can be reduced to a slogan. And so what the book really sets out to do is like, what are these little practical skills that you can do every day in your classroom to show, to model, to improve your own growth mindset in order to foster growth mindset in your students?
Yeah, let's get into the book now. So this is the second edition to the original book, which includes updated research. So walk us through some of those most compelling updates, especially the research that might surprise teachers who think of growth mindset as something simple or familiar, or as basic as a poster on the wall that just says growth mindset, right? I mean, it's a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think that was at the beginning when we wrote this book in 2016. So this is the 10-year anniversary of the book. When we first wrote it, it really was this like kind of like simple idea that finally has a name. Like a lot of the stuff in the book, you'll probably be like I knew that, but I like didn't know that it had a name or whatever.
That's okay. So that's what happened to me a lot when I was reading through it. Okay, I understood what I was doing, but okay, now I can pinpoint certain other things along the way that I did do well with that. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
but yes,
I love
that's
that.
exactly what happened to me. So yes, you
totally
hit that. Yes.
If you haven't been feeling well for a while or something, and then you finally get a diagnosis and you're like, it now has a name.
Now it makes sense.
Now I can like move forward. And so I think that's initially what it was. Well, then, it really caught on like wildfire. And we started seeing growth mindset being incorporated into, school mission statements and on bulletin boards and in the hallways, and really important part of learning in a lot of places. And so as that caught on, I think the research kind of shifted towards, does growth mindset make a difference, or can it work, to like what more understanding about the specific context in which it's most impactful. So like we know, for example, like having a high socioeconomic status is the largest predictor of academic achievement, right? And so growth mindset has a smaller effect size, but in different contexts, it's more impactful. So like among at-risk students or with students who have a low SES, right? It's a more impactful practice. And so there's a lot more information about the implementation of growth mindset, and also just like developing the quality of instruction surrounding it. So less about, a lot of Carol Dweck's earlier experiments and research were just like a 45-minute intervention, or like giving kids one sentence, a growth mindset phrase and a fixed mindset phrase, and seeing how they respond, right? And so it's just become like having more depth and more robust, and generally like more of shaping the best practice recommendations for teachers and schools who are interested in this kind of work. So moving beyond, that kind of misnomer that growth mindset is this like magical, the silver bullet, this cure-all, to understanding growth mindset teaching in context and when it's impactful and what are the conditions that will make it most successful. So those are really the research updates, and didn't have to do a lot of like going back and saying, well, they determined this wasn't really as effective, so that's good. So it's just more of like a building of it, I think is what the new research is.
Heather, you also mentioned in the book that it's broken down a little bit differently, right, with the months. So how does that play a role in all of this that we're starting with today?
Right. So there's so much in education. It's a practice. And so we're continuing ourselves. We're continuously learning new things, new ways in which instruction can be best delivered for students, how the brain works, so many different pieces. And so when we designed the book, we really wanted it to be something that could be chunked down month to month. It could be easily adapted into a classroom experience or into a leadership experience where you're really walking through some professional learning with your staff, and just digestible again in those small chunks and with a lot of reflection. Like, we really wanted to make sure that there was space for that reflective piece to happen. So I think breaking it down month by month in smaller sections, it makes it a little bit more manageable to digest and just applicable to all the other things that are happening in education, like kind of set up by that month to month seasons, if you will, in which you're working with students and kind of navigating education. So yeah, second edition follows that same line of the month to month guide, which I think is just, we've gotten a lot of great feedback on. It's helpful, whether it's for book clubs, whether it's for an individual read or a small group of teachers wanting to navigate this together. That's been helpful.
Yeah, the goal is really like we just thought about all the different parts and pieces of how to create a classroom where growth mindsets can flourish. And then we just focused on one skill. So it's giving feedback. It's teaching about how the brain works. And then we just focus on that one skill every month. And then by the end of the year, you've hopefully had this like year-long holistic development course in growth mindset.
Well, when I was reading it, I was thinking, wow, new teachers, this is so up their alley. This is a perfect book for a new teacher because new teachers could really absorb a lot. I mean, yes, they're probably overwhelmed. I was when I first started, but to have this kind of like month by month navigation of, okay, here's what we're going to do right off the bat in August and September. Try it, see how it works, let it marinate a little bit, then add something new, and then add something new and new and new as you go month by month. I think is a great way to actually kind of get your feet wet through, your first year or two, right? Especially as a new teacher, because you don't have that experience yet.
I think one of the biggest, we did like some type of informal poll or something when we were first writing the book about, do the teachers we know in their pre-service education, did they have any classes about, or did they get any information about like how we learn? And it did, like somewhere in there, it says like, it's just so interesting that all these kids and adults meet together in buildings across the world every day for the purpose of education, but we never really learn like how learning happens in our bodies. And I think that's also a really impactful thing for new teachers to like just understand how learning works, which we all just kind of like assume we know. But when you start breaking down neurons and axons and connections, you're like, oh, like it. And what is frustration? Like, just like being hungry, your body gives you cues that you're hungry. Like, learning gives you cues. You feel frustrated. You feel overwhelmed. You want, your body has a reaction when you're doing something challenging or learning something tough. And so we wanted teachers really to understand, like, this is like an actual growth that's happening every day that you're facilitating, and to really understand how that is happening.
And you mentioned it before, when you don't realize you're doing it, and then you realize all of a sudden it hits you. It's, oh, wow. Okay. Now it makes sense. That it really is full circle. Look, I mean, we all went to college for like our degrees at some point, and, we got through that. But you're right. Until you're actually in that situation with kids in front of you and someone says, go, you kind of just rely on what you're seeing and what you're experiencing at the moment, but you don't really necessarily understand all that stuff. We've taken psychology classes and how to teach, or, a math class, how to do that and how to use manipulatives. And we've all done that. But when you're really in it, it is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people understand that part, right?
Yeah. And I think this could be a really great tool for mentors and mentees. So like that first couple of years in teaching, like being able to do this with somebody who's been in the practice, and then having that reflective piece along the lines, like where did they see, like you mentioned, you had some aha moments and like, oh, just reflective pieces like, oh, this is maybe when I really did embrace a growth mindset or fixed mindset. And how did that show up? And
it's not really a one read and done kind of situation. You can go back to this 100 times. You're going to have new kids in front of you. You might teach a new grade or a new subject, and you can always go back to this. So I think it's just the setup is really easy. It's just a great way for a teacher to like say, okay, where is this coming from? And let me start from this point now and go.
Yeah.
You also don't have to start at the beginning. So pick your month of
Yeah.
January, February, like you get to pick your month of where you want to start and how you want to launch.
I love it. So let's go into a little bit more of, even with this new teacher thing, which I kind of like this in terms of that angle, and even the mentorship, like you just mentioned. In the new edition, you emphasize hands-on lesson plans that integrate social emotional learning, which obviously has become a huge selling point in today's classrooms. So how does SEL research intersect with mindset research, and how can teachers design social emotional learning experiences that actively cultivate that growth mindset in their students?
Well, like as we've said, growth mindset is all about a learner's belief about whether or anyone's belief about whether their skills, abilities, and intelligence can be developed, can be meaningfully changed. So whereas SEL, I've debated this in my own head, like, is growth mindset part of SEL? And I've kind of landed on this idea that they're very interconnected ideas, because
they do share some qualities here and there along the way. That's what I noticed when I was reading this, because there were some times in the book where I was reading it and I was like, wait, I know it's not formally mentioned or stated, but I'm like, wow, this is really social emotional learning here, and we didn't even realize it. So that was some of my aha moments as I was going through it as well.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like and you can debate me on this, Heather. I think it's kind of like a belief system. If we think of growth mindset as a belief system about yourself and your abilities, that can just underpin social emotional learning teaching. So belief in your ability to change and grow as a person, to be a better listener, to build strong relationships. That's the same thing as like becoming a good math student, right? So I think it reinforces those critical competencies in SEL, like self-awareness or metacognition. We talk like SEL, there's a lot about reflection. And in the book, we talk about metacognition, or thinking about your thinking, making decisions in pursuit of a goal, right? So am I going to make a good decision? Am I going to choose to practice today? Am I going to choose not to practice today, or whatever it is? And then I also think developing growth mindset will help translate those social emotional learning skills into actual like behavior choices. So why is it important to reflect? Why is it important to set goals? Why is it important to be a problem solver, or to regulate your emotions? If you don't believe those things will help you make meaningful changes as a person, you won't do it. And growth mindset helps you develop the belief that these SEL practices can make a difference in the kind of person you are, in being a good decision maker, and being someone people want to have a relationship with, and being able to self-manage and be self-aware. So they're really like these very strongly related ideas. Not exactly the same thing, but definitely deeply interconnected, because, growth mindset helps shape our interpretation of our ability to manage challenges and grow and develop as people.
Yeah, I think one thing, I don't know if I read this or where it came up, but thinking about SEL as the toolkit, where there's lots of different pieces that fit into that toolkit, and growth mindset being one of those pieces, with that as the skill development, just like resilience, perseverance, being, having self-regulation, all of those different SEL elements that we want to see, those employability skills, all of those pieces fit within that toolkit of social emotional learning. Mm-hmm. And so I think the growth mindset, building upon those skills, exactly like you mentioned.
And I think, they're at their best when they're developed together in an environment that consistently supports social emotional learning and growth mindset.
Hey, take me back to kindergarten or first grade. That's my point. I think that's my point here. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to explore some useful techniques that you can start using in your classroom right now. More with Annie Brock and Heather Hundley. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Attention educators, meet the Logitech Zone Learn, the classroom headset designed for learners and built for schools. Engineered for comfort and durability, the Zone Learn delivers crystal clear audio, helping students focus and fully engage during lessons, group projects, and online learning. Built to last, its modular design adapts to any classroom setting and ensures a reliable, distraction-free learning experience. With Zone Learn, your students can hear the difference, which helps boost learning. For more information, visit logitech.com/Zone Learn. Bullying affects every school, but together we can change the story. Box Out Bullying brings powerful bullying prevention education to life through engaging interactive theater that gets students thinking, participating, and learning in meaningful ways. Through dynamic school assemblies, classroom workshops, and training for educators and families, Box Out Bullying equips entire school communities with the tools to build empathy, confidence, and respect. Whether in person or online, these high-energy programs inspire students to be upstanders, not bystanders, and help create safer, more inclusive learning environments. Make your school a place where every student feels seen, supported, and valued. Box Out Bullying. Empower, include, respect. For more, visit boxoutbullying.com today. Welcome back to Classroom Dynamics. Today, it's all about the growth mindset. So here's a question that I have for you, which is getting more of the psychological end of it. And we started to talk about that a little bit earlier. So one of the things that you guys focus on in the book is constructive feedback techniques that are grounded in the latest psychological research. It's just not good job, nice work. We've all seen that on papers before. But so based on your work, though, what are some of the most effective language strategies teachers can start to use, or maybe even stop using, to encourage growth mindset, particularly when students are frustrated or they're failing or they're just not into it, there's no engagement? What can teachers do?
Yeah, that is exactly right. There's several things that we can do differently, thinking about the language that we use with our students. Annie mentioned it earlier, like, you're so smart, when we talk about students, especially who may be identified as gifted, as that being one of the things that we're reinforcing a behavior we don't necessarily want to see. We don't want them to think that because they don't fail or they don't have challenges in their learning, that that's a negatively impact on who they are as a person. And so one thing that we can do is really go back to process. What's the process, and praising the process? What steps did the students take? I like how you figured out that this was the next strategy. Using that word yet, like, you maybe don't have it yet. I know some of the research that we talked about was from Professor John Hattie and the visible learning, and the meta-analysis that he has done over a course of thousands of studies, over 300 million students. And we know that through all of those meta-analyses, the marker of 0.4 being what shows to be an average year's growth per year of schooling for a student. And so any factor that has an effect size that's above that 0.4, we know has an even greater effect on student learning. And so when we think about corrective feedback, that has an effect size of 0.92. And so thinking about, like, that can really accelerate learning for students. And so we have to make sure that they are understanding that growth is a continuous improvement. I think foundational to any of that is relationships with kids. Like, they have to know what you're saying and that it's coming from an authentic place, that you've built those connections with students. And so having that relationship with them is essential in order. I mean, think about yourself as an adult. Do you take constructive feedback from someone that you may not have a great relationship with? So I think first and foremost, that's got to be there, that relationship, and then being able to build on that. Some of the phrases that we talked about previously. What are the things that we can say to help students continue to build upon that growth mindset messaging, and how do they internalize what we're saying? So having that relationship, again, is essential to being able to build upon that constructive feedback, and then the words that we say matter. And so when we praise the process that students take in their journey, their learning journey, that has an incredibly different outcome than praising the person themselves as being smart.
We talk about performance praise versus process praise in the book. And I do think in a lot of ways, our grading can get problematic with feedback. And I am the mother of a 7th grader and a 9th grader, and a former high school English teacher. And, I realized it was an issue that whenever I would introduce a new project or whatever, hand would go up. What's the first question? How many points is this worth? I'm like, that's not what I want the focus to be on. And so I think we talk about some like creative ways to grade, standards-based grading and things like that too. Giving really great feedback, especially if you're constrained by like the grading system at your school. It can be really difficult. My daughter, just to give an anecdote, my daughter came home before this holiday break, and she said, well, my social studies teacher just sprung on us that we're going to have to be able to identify all 50 states on a map in 2 days. And she said, I've already done the math and I only need to get 12 right to get an A still. So I'm only going to worry about 12 of them. And I was like, whoa. Like, you're going to be happy, only getting 12. Like, why not try? I mean, it'd be kind of cool to be able to identify then I thought, can I identify all 50 states on a map? So we, get a map printout and I'm trying and her dad's trying and we're struggling. And then she downloads an app and she's like, I can do better than this. And she's, the first time she gets 12 and then she gets 17. And I'm not kidding. 2 days later, she came home and slammed her paper down. 50 out of 50. And it was so cool to be able to just with questions, just being like, well, why don't you want to know? Or wouldn't it be cool to know? And like, what does this mean to know like where all 50 states are? And to create a challenge out of it, take it away from the math of like, I only need 12 points in order to get a 91%. And then, and I think too, especially our older kids can get really caught up in that, thinking that it is about whatever that grade is, it's going to lead me to another grade, and never shy about doing that math, right? But I think too, feedback can be just questions, just prompting them to think more about like, why are we doing this? Or I give another example in the book from when my daughter was little, and I took her to a little art museum that had like a play place for kids, and she'd drawn a picture. And she held it, she was like 3, and held it up to one of the workers there. And said in like the cutest way possible, like, do you like my picture? And I was so stunned by this that I remember to this day quite clearly that the lady who worked there said, well, I'd rather know what you think about, or I'd rather know what you like about your picture. And just like turned it around on her in this question. And then she's like, well, I like the trees and I made blue flowers, and she's giving all these details. And it would have been so easy for that lady to have been like, oh, it's gorgeous. You're a little Picasso, right? And just to kind of give her throwaway feedback like that good job that you were saying. But instead she asked a question that really prompted her to give herself feedback, which I think is a very interesting way to think about it.
That when I read that, it's funny you said that, because when I read that, I teach media arts technology. Mm-hmm. So, we're always making digital pictures, or it's coding, or it's building, there's a lot to it visually. And I think I get that question more times than not. You like my picture? And they get very shocked when I say, I don't know, do you like your picture? And I'll just turn around and I'll see, I love it, but what do you think? And you got to see, like, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. He was just supposed to say, yes, I like it. Or, or maybe they were thinking I was going to say something else. But when I shock them and I say, I don't know, what do you think? They look at me like I have 10 heads. And, it's like, oh, how do I respond to that? That's a good question. And you can actually see them on their face, their expression change, and the thinking start. It's I think, and like you said, with your own daughter, it's that relationship, right? Which is a great way to go into my next question, because relationships, if your teacher and you do not have a good relationship, we all know it's probably over from the beginning. And on page 86 in your book, you do talk about exactly that. You talk about why relationships matter. You even gave an example from a 2013 TED Talk called Every Kid Needs a Champion. And you go on to mention in a conversation that Rita Pearson, I think it was, that she shares in an exchange that she ends up having with one of her colleagues, talking about how kids don't learn from people that they don't like. Now, we all have grown up with teachers we don't like. They may have agitated us. They may have put us down. They might have belittled us at some point, didn't realize that they were doing it. And we take that. We hold on to those things sometimes. So I know this is a bit of a loaded question, but why is it so pivotal from that conversation, that quote, if you don't like your teacher, you can't build anything with it. You can't change anything. So how does that all work? Because I think, again, it's a loaded question. We all know the answer to this one, but teachers, I think sometimes they don't realize, in order to change what is happening in their classroom, they need to build a solid foundational academic relationship with their students, right? So how does that all now come into play?
Well, I think you could just as easily say, like, people don't learn from people, or kids don't learn from people they don't like. I think you could just as easily say no one learns from someone they cannot be vulnerable with, because
Mm-hmm.
learning in and of itself is like an act of vulnerability. To say, I don't know, can you teach me, is an act of vulnerability. And as teachers, I feel like we have to treat that with the and honor that role in a kid's life, and to create space where they can feel vulnerable, which is why so much of growth mindset is about embracing mistakes and normalizing mistakes, and teaching people how to grapple with failure. And you're not going to be able to do those things if you're going to be judged or punished. And if you think about, why didn't you like, I think about the teachers I had that I didn't like. Why didn't I like them? I mean, I can truly honestly say, like, they weren't nice. They yelled at me. They yelled at the class. These are the same reasons my kids don't like certain teachers. They get yelled at. There's like an element of like collective punishment. When one person doesn't follow the rules, everyone is punished, and it doesn't matter. And these are things that just degrade the trust. And the good thing about teaching is, I think in a lot of situations, kids will come in ready to trust you, and wanting to trust you. But man, if you break that trust, then they are going to come in guarded, and you can't learn when you're guarded, because you
Right.
can't say, I don't know. I don't know, Heather, this is more your wheelhouse than mine, so you might have a different thought.
I'm just kind of reminded of Brene Brown talks about the marble jar friends and that trust piece. And it's really even getting to know you as a human, as a person. That her friends, her daughter was talking about, this is a person that she would really trust with everything, her biggest secrets. And when Brene was asking her daughter, don't quote me on all of the directness of this, but as Brene was asking her daughter about, like, why is that a marble jar friend? And she's like, because she takes time to get to know, like, she knew my Nana and Papa, like she referenced them as Nana and Papa. She knew that's what I called them. It was really knowing the person, and taking time to get connected on a level that sometimes we don't make time for or space for. And outside of just the learning, like our students as a whole, like, rather than just, you're a student on my roster in this particular class at this particular time, like really getting to know them and what are their interests, who are they as a person outside of math class or ELA class, or as I mentioned before, being a kindergarten teacher, being a principal, I'm now at a district level, but just thinking about all the different ways that I can try to interact with students outside of the classroom, whether that's being able to greet them at the door, going to an after school event or activity, showing up and, being a mentor to a student. Like, we talk about different things, and that's a really great way to start building relationships. And then to continue that conversation around the feedback and really creating that environment of, practicing growth mindset. And I think Annie nailed it when she said it's very vulnerable, like at creating, what's your favorite mistake, setting up your environment, but being that person as the teacher to model that for your kids is critical too. Like, I don't know how to do this either, but we're going to do it together. And so my husband's an ELA secondary teacher, and I was actually working with the math department at his school. And one of the things that they, at the high school, like, we were just talking growth and fixed mindset, and how there are other teachers then who, if students ask them for help, they're like, I don't know, I'm not a math person. And like, immediately just helping to get a different narrative of, like, what's a better way to say that? Like, ask a question, ask, what strategies have you used? You don't have to know the answer, or you don't have to know even the process, but I think how we respond to things like that creates an entirely different environment where we do feel like we can figure out how to learn the 50 states, if you will. Like, you put it into a challenge, right? It's a challenge, and we can learn this together. I don't know all of it. Annie gave it a great example of that with her daughter, of like being able to map that out. And even
To be vulnerable together.
to be vulnerable, and it's okay to act, right? My 5-year-olds, in my classroom didn't know if I knew how to do the thing, the mistake, but I could model through that and pretend like, I don't know how to do this, but let's figure out what are ways that you can help me, because kids love to help. And so, like, help me figure out how to navigate this. And I think that just helps. Again, it's got to be authentic. And
Mhm.
You can set that up in the best way possible in your classroom, but I think that's the relationship's critical. And yeah, just like Rita mentioned, like nobody's going to learn from somebody that they don't like.
I
And
hear too much online too of like, oh, like teachers should never share any like shred of their personal life with students and things like that. And I just think, gosh, that is it. Relationships are a two-way street. And the thing is, like, what is it? It's hard to define like being loved or being cared for, but what is it? It's like being seen, right? You have to know someone and to be able to respond to their needs in a way that they need. And that is what makes someone feel cared for, and that requires like this a level of exchange. I mean, that it's that there's an exchange, and I feel like it is fraught. It's fraught for teachers, and it's hard to develop relationships with all the students. But I think what Heather too is saying, like, if you come in with curiosity, if you ask them for help, they love help. I mean, especially teachers, like one of the best ways to like to say like like, oh, could you do me a favor and put that kid in charge of the classroom while you walk out for 5 minutes, or to say, does anyone know how this AI works? And then, they can come and show you something. I think that's a great way to develop relationships. So it's different at every school, and the threshold for, sharing and whatever is different, but it has to be that, like, there has to be some element of like exchange and relationship, because that is the only way people are willing to be vulnerable. And it is just a truism of being a human,
I had a teacher once say to me, a colleague of mine, so that let's really put this into perspective. A colleague of mine once said to me, "Why are you being so nice to them?" I'm sorry, that's my job. I'm supposed to be. I want to be. This is why I'm doing it in the first place. I don't understand the question, But I've heard that, and I'm sure people have heard this, and people have said this to other people that are listening, and it does get very frustrating for the person who wants to be that person versus the person who's saying, "Why are you being that person?" There's a different tone. And well, now I know who you are and how you are with your kids, and why my kids respond to me a little bit better than what your kids probably respond to you as. So, again, you said it perfectly. The relationship is a two-way street. And yeah, I love sharing some of when I talk about my own daughter, or, trip that I went on or something, the kids light up. They love it. There's a connection there, and I can take that any direction I want afterwards. But to have that mean attitude, or the like you said, just going to cut off every word and yell, it just doesn't work. And I think most people understand that. And that's why we all got into the profession in the first place, is to help and be that person and be that hero to somebody, to look up to. And, I don't know, like, it bothers me when I hear that. I haven't heard that in a while, but it did, like, when I hear, like, why are you being so nice? Just because it's supposed to be that way. I don't know what world you're supposed to be in, but it's education. You want to make it fun. You want to have that relationship. So, I'm glad you actually mentioned that.
And the energy that you get from being nice versus, like, I don't know, but my entire demeanor changes when I am, approaching things with that kind of an attitude of kindness and grace, and versus if I have a deficit mindset, or I'm thinking, that there's got to be this negative realm around it. Like the level of my own energy changes.
Kindness is like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, it just is, it's open. And openness is like a necessary ingredient for learning. You have to be open to an idea. So even if you are that, like Rita Pearson in that anecdote she tells, and it's a great TED Talk, by the way, highly recommend people to listen. But like, she is talking to someone who says, it's my job to teach, and their job to listen. I teach, they listen. Like, I don't need to be all nicey, right? And she said, she said what she said. Kids don't learn from people they don't like. And even if you think that way, part of your teaching, you have to still approach it with openness about how that teaching matters in the life of that kid, which means considering the life of that kid. Like, how will becoming a good writer, how does becoming, getting these spelling words, why does it matter for them? Why is it important? So even if you're just straight teaching and you don't want to share anything about yourself, and you don't want to, go beyond that teacher-student relationship, there are still relational aspects to teaching that you have to consider in order to help the learning resonate. And that it comes back to that like openness.
Yeah,
Openness.
you're right.
And I think too, like why the people who are saying that or maybe have that approach, getting curious a little bit as to what has led them to believe this, like asking questions
Get
around
curious, not furious.
that.
That's what we say.
Yeah. What has led you to feeling this way?
Yeah.
Something has shaped that experience for them.
It's true. It's true. As adults or as kids, somewhere in the middle, something happened along the line. Let's switch gears into technology now. So, especially, and Annie, you just mentioned it. The biggest buzzword of them all right now is AI. Right. The second edition does include new content on AI as a teaching tool, because again, there's a lot of misconceptions about AI in the classroom and how that's all going to be embraced. But what are some concrete ways teachers can then leverage AI, or even other ed tech tools for that matter? I mean, it doesn't really have to land on AI, in order to reinforce growth mindset without it becoming that crutch for that kid.
Yeah. Oh, this is a doozy, isn't it? A lot of conversation about this. And I like kind of, two, like a spectrum stands out. On one end, we have like ban it. It doesn't belong in the classroom. Nobody can use it. It's cheating. To, teachers have just like, very enthusiastic, no guardrails. And so I think you can take a growth mindset approach to AI as you can with all things. And the first thing is just to ask yourself, like, before trying to implement AI, is like, what mindset are you approaching AI in education with? Are you just making the assumption that kids are going to cheat with it and that what's done with it is cheating? Do you have this attitude like it's, the end of writing, or, thinking as we know it, and it's thinking for you? Are you pursuing it with no guardrails? Are you not considering kind of these other aspects that are important to consider? So I'm reading a lot of like outright bans, like the website is banned. It's not allowed. If you use AI on assignment, you're expelled, or it's cheating or whatever. And I think it's missing an opportunity to leverage AI to just improve our practice as teachers. So what do I mean by that? What does that look like? Number one, I think for both you, the teacher, and for students, that AI makes a really excellent thought partner. Like if you don't have someone to banter ideas off of. Now, in some ways, is AI kind of mirroring what you're saying and your ideas? Yes. So can you learn to, write better questions? Or but how does prompting work? And how do you get a real response from prompting? And where does this answer that's generated come from? So like we just said, get curious, not furious. Like ask questions, try to figure out how it works. I took like a really basic online course about what AI is. And when people are talking about AI in school context, I think they're talking about large language models. And we have to understand, like, just like all computer programs, right? It's like, it's working on ones and zeros. It's a yes, no. And every single word that's being generated by a ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, it's just taking an educated guess at the next best word. Okay, so we know that knowing what you're working with is important. And then understanding, like, okay, how can I use this, and where does the thinking come in? And so, like I said, using it as a thought partner, using AI after effort, not in place of it. So putting in your assignment or the thing that you wrote and saying,
I love that. I think that might be a poster in my room coming up. Say that again. Say that again. That was great.
Using AI after effort, not in place of it.
I love that.
So being able to say, what did I miss? Where are the gaps in my thinking here? What mistakes did I make? What could be fleshed out a little more? Where did I talk too much? As part of that effort and revision cycle of your work, I think is like an excellent resource. Making it part of the plan, like for teachers, when you're doing a project, maybe you do this piece and then you can ask AI to critique your work, to have it point out where your reasoning maybe isn't clear, or evaluate the quality of the evidence that you included in your paper, or ask it to interview you on the topic. I've used in my last job, I asked AI, like, interview me. Like, I want to practice interviewing. And so it generated questions for me to ask. So ask it to ask you questions. And these are all exercises in thinking where you, the user, are doing the work and not the AI. And then I think my final thought is AI is like quite literally being built into the infrastructure of our country, like huge data centers, large corporations, multi-billion, trillion-dollar corporations. And so the debate on whether it's right or wrong, while that is a debate, worth having, like the how. The fact is that it just is. Like it is part of our lives, and our job is to prepare our students for reality, not shield them from it. So it's really important to teach kids and for you as a teacher to understand what role AI plays in that. So responsible use of it, understanding that it can be wrong, like not everything, understanding that it's just guessing the next best word. So it's also like such a good opportunity to model. It's a new, like I just said, like to say, I'm not great with this yet. Like, how do you use AI? Or help me figure out how to get it to generate this. And then I also think just like differentiation, or if you need to get kids in a better zone of proximal development to say, can you make this challenge a little less, or can you make it a little bit more for this student over here? If a student's struggling to connect to like a math topic, maybe they're really, and this is a part where relationships come in, maybe they're really into Batman or Barbie or Legos. Ask AI to help you generate math problems that bring in these concepts that they really like. And so I think there's a lot of great use for AI. I think, and like I said, like we can talk about the good and the bad of it, and I think those are conversations worth happening. But
it's still going to be a tool for them growing up or later in life in terms of careers. It's funny you mentioned that. I just had a conversation with a bunch of parents about what AI could look like in the classroom and what it's probably going to look like in the very near future. And I was, I'm usually pretty good at getting through them, but some of them were just hardcore. Nope, stopping. I don't think so. Never, not my kid. Nope, not gonna. I'm gonna prevent this as far as I can push this. And I said to them, go back to when you were a kid. I said, think back to like in the 80s, mid 80s, when everyone had a Casio watch on their wrist with a calculator, and how everyone started using that as the tool to help them do their math homework. And they were like, okay. And I said, now think 10 to 15 years later when the internet came about and everyone started doing what? Everyone was Googling. Okay, so we were looking up information and getting information really quickly and helping us learn some of the stuff that we were learning in our classrooms. I said, now what's up? Now we got AI. Now it's another step higher that we all are going to use. And you said it's being built into the infrastructure in everything you do. I don't even think people realize how much it really has already gone into our lives. But when I made that connection of the growth of technology and how they use it as a tool, all of a sudden I had one of the parents say, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I get it now. So I think, there, sometimes you hear so much of the negative that you kind of put that wall up and say, it's just, I'm not going to allow that in. I'm not going to let my kid, but if a kid, doesn't know how to prompt, or a kid doesn't know how to use it as feedback, or they don't know how to use it properly, ethically, that's a problem moving forward. I think we could all agree with that. So it's better to almost do it now and start something where, as opposed to a couple years down the road, you have to start backtracking, and now it's being used for evil and not good, and then you'll have all the naysayers say, I told you so. But, I think that's also part of a teacher's responsibility and the parents at home to start to teach their kids how to use it properly so that that doesn't happen. And we can use it as that learning tool in the classroom, because I think, look, kids are going to use it anyway, right? Even if a parent says no, trust me, if there's any parents that are listening, your kids are going to figure out how to use it. Okay. That's just the way it is. So it's such it's a hard road to navigate. There's a lot of meandering. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of nonsense in there, but like you mentioned, there's so much good in it as well. Heather, go ahead.
No, I just was going to say, I think too, it's really interesting to hear or to think about how we approached this new learning, because it's new for all of us. It hasn't existed previously in the work that we're doing in education and from students. And so it is such a great way to, I think teachers can let their guard down a little bit in saying, like, I don't know how to use this. And so it's a little bit back to that vulnerability, and also like asking those questions, being able to approach it with a growth mindset. And I think for parents, it's a great way to bring them into that same conversation around growth mindset messaging. How can we work together? What are the questions we can be asking? No, we don't know the outcome of this yet. Or how this is going to impact employability, jobs down in the future. But what we do know is it is here and it's already impacting the workforce in a lot of
Yeah.
different areas. I happen to be at a conference, an AI conference specifically, in which train HVAC systems were talking about how it is now critical for their employees of, the work that they're doing, their mechanics, to be AI literate. They need to know how to engage with their systems using AI. And whether they've been on the job for 20 years or if they're just starting, they're all moving through this new training and developing the skills, because it's critical for their overall productivity of the company and how they can continue to grow. And so I think that AI literacy, figuring out how we're going to engage and create and design and manage, is going to be critical moving forward. But I think we can layer in elements of growth mindset along the way. And this is a really, really authentic and organic path to bring in that conversation with parents too.
This is perfect growth mindset, because we are building the plane as we fly it. That old saying is actually really true right now. And, look, when a kid asks a question and a teacher can honestly say, I don't know, let's work on it together. What a great, perfect opportunity to show them it's not fixed anymore. Now we're going to growth, and we could start to work this together. And there again is your relationship, because, hey, you're being honest too. I don't know. Let's see what happens. Well, let's try it. See what happens.
There is too some great conversations you can have, because this exists in history. I mean, when this is some research I did after AI came along, and I'm a professional writer, so I'm like, oh gosh, like I'm cooked, right? And so then I started reading kind of how this particular era has some precedent. So take when the camera was invented, right? There used to be a whole workforce of portrait artists whose job were to paint people and their families sitting there, right? And overnight, this job became completely obsolete, because you could do it fast. No one wants to sit 12 hours for a portrait. You could do it faster, better. And what happened? Well, yes, portrait artistry went by the wayside, but that was the moment that gave rise to Impressionist art. That is when people thought, well, what else can we paint? Let's do so. And then we got Impressionism from it. The same with digital audio workstations in the 1960s, 70s. An audio engineer's job used to be to invite the whole band, the Beatles, come in the studio, and they have all these wires and tape and cords and everything going everywhere. And their main job was to capture with fidelity, with as much fidelity as possible, the sound in a recording of the band. Well, that all of a sudden we have this tool where you can capture anything with 100% fidelity. And there was this big hubbub that these audio engineers thought, well, that's it. That's the end of what we do. But no, it wasn't, because then they started bringing all these new and interesting sounds and realizing they could record other things and now we get, all these, maybe that becomes a sound, or it widened the scope of what music could be and recording could be. And so I think if we look at through that lens, of that growth mindset lens of let's widen the scope of what we can do now that we have the same with calculators, right? We definitely had teachers who said, well, you may not always have one. Well, I've got one
now
right
in my pocket. Everything you just mentioned. We have a phone, we have a camera in our pocket, we have a calculator in our pocket, we have AI in our pocket, we have the internet in our pocket, we have communication in our, my goodness, everything's in our pocket now. So you have to use the tools. At least you have to show the kids how to use it properly, right? So
responsibly. And there have been some, it is worth saying, there have been situations. I think there was one specific one where a kid ultimately committed suicide, and the parents are suing because they felt like the AI coached that. And I hope, and obviously devastating, terrible situation. And I think parents need to be cautious about letting their kids use AI unsupervised. But in a supervised environment, it can be, I can see it becoming a really powerful tool for personalization, for growth and development, if we use it the right way. And I think that starts with getting on board about how can we leverage this for the best possible good in education.
Right. I think a nice twist to all this is the fact that now you have to start thinking of guardrails. You're
Yeah.
not just giving the keys to a Ferrari to a 10-year-old and saying, have fun, let's see what
Yeah.
happens. Obviously that car is not going to last. But I think now we're at the crossroads where I think for the most part, now we can start to figure out how to kind of bottle it together and give it those guardrails so that the kids actually do what they need with it.
And
We're going to
teachers make
take
a difference. Yeah.
no,
in that.
100%. No,
We
that
can lead the
teachers
charge.
the teachers are going to, if the teachers aren't there to show them and make that difference, then we are all in trouble in about another 10 years from now. I guarantee it. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to wrap things up with Annie Brock and Heather Hundley. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this. Looking for teaching resources that truly engage and inspire your students? Discover Highly Motivated on Teachers Pay Teachers, your go-to source for ready-to-use lesson plans, interactive notebooks and lapbooks, test prep passages, and meaningful small group projects. Designed by educators for educators, these resources save you time while boosting student motivation and learning. Highly Motivated, motivating teaching resources that engage and inspire. For more, search Highly Motivated on Teachers Pay Teachers today. Welcome back to Classroom Dynamics, where today it's all about the growth mindset. And we're going to just wrap things up with Annie Brock and Heather Hundley. We have 2 minutes left. For each of you, what's one piece of advice that you'd like to offer teachers before we end today?
Believe in your ability to grow, in your intelligence, your skills and ability to grow, right? No, that is growth mindset. But remember that when we talk about growth mindset, when we talk about growth and achievement, that is not just for your students. It isn't just for kids. It's for us too. That you make a mistake in the classroom, that is expected. And if up to this point you realize I've been teaching with a fixed mindset all this time, let that go and understand like you can grow and develop. Learn to put effort into different things and watch your skills and abilities in that area flourish. That there is no such thing as a perfect teacher, that we're all just a work in progress. I am one, you're one, Heather's one. Adam, I'm sure you feel the same way.
And now I make mistakes all the time and it's okay. You see, I'm okay with that now. Back when I was 6 or 7, that was not a thing, but yes, of course you're going to make mistakes, and that's how we learn from things.
Yeah.
You're right.
Own it, embrace your growth mindset. And if you get in the fixed mindset, just remind yourself it's okay. It happens, and try to move yourself back down that spectrum.
I think just to kind of piggyback off of that is thinking about your self-talk. Like, what do you say to yourself? Maybe if you're not even saying it out loud, what's the first thing that you say to yourself? And even just taking that minor step of like paying attention. What's the messaging that I'm constantly saying to myself? And then how do I approach that when I have new learning in front of me? What's holding me back from taking or embracing that as a challenge? What happens if I make a mistake or if I fail? How is it that I'm modeling that for my kids, my own kids, my students in my classroom, and my colleagues, right? Because we can also influence our colleagues. And so I think all of that starts with yourself, and then be able to build and grow from there.
What a great conversation. You guys are fantastic. Your research-backed insights definitely remind us that growth mindset is more than just a strategy. It's actually really classroom culture for all of us, from constructive feedback to social emotional learning practices, and even AI tools like we were just talking about. You've given us practical ways to help students and look, even ourselves, right? Because what's the point if we can't grow along with our kids? So before we go, tell everyone where they can go to find out more about the Growth Mindset Coach 2nd edition, and any of your socials that you'd like to share with us.
I think it's the Growth Mindset Coach is available on all major booksellers, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, bookshop.org if you prefer to shop independent stores. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Annie Brock is my name. I would love to connect with you there. Heather, we're not big socials.
Yeah. Same on LinkedIn as well, Heather Hundley. And would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. That would be great.
Fantastic. Well, for those of you who have been listening today, thank you for tuning in today, and make sure that you share what you've learned or any takeaways or reflections that you've had, and tag us on X at Class Dynamics or Instagram at Classroom Dynamics Podcast. See, we have socials, so you guys might have to get some for your book here.
We need to do better.
You can also find out all about us and our links, including information about our sponsors on Linktree at Classroom Dynamics. We also look forward to hearing your thoughts on our episodes and sharing the different ways in which you're using what you've learned. More importantly, Share this episode with one colleague who you feel can benefit from today's show. You can also help support Classroom Dynamics with as little as $3 a month at classroomdynamicspodcast.buzzsprout.com. Once again, I'd like to thank Annie Brock and Heather Hundley for joining me today on Classroom Dynamics. Thank you for being part of this today. The time that you spent with us today, I think it really is going to make a big difference in many of teacher out there. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We had a great time. Great talk.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of Classroom Dynamics. I hope today's conversation sparked something meaningful for you, maybe a new idea, a fresh perspective, or just a little boost of motivation to take back to your classroom. Remember, it's never too late to strengthen your craft, and if there's ever a moment to re-energize your work, why not make it today? I'm Adam Todd, and you've been listening to Classroom Dynamics, a teacher podcast. Follow us on X at Class Dynamics and on Instagram at Classroom Dynamics Podcast. If you haven't already, go to your favorite podcast platform like Apple Podcasts or Spotify and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. We'll be back soon with more captivating conversations, inspiring stories, and strategies that you can implement into your everyday routines. Until then, keep that spark alive and never underestimate the incredible impact you have as an educator. You're more powerful and inspirational than you think. Did you miss our episode with Dr. Marianne Wolf of UCLA? If so, Dr. Wolf returned to Classroom Dynamics for an in-depth look at phonics and the science of reading, exploring RAVO and the POSSUM framework, and instruction beyond traditional phonics.
One of our major goals is to help people understand that neuroscience helps us understand reading as anything but natural. And that what we are as teachers doing is trying to incorporate in our teaching the major components of the reading brain and what the child brings to it that we can help connect. Okay, now we've talked about expanding foundational skills, and at the top of the list is phonics.